Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Let Me Think podcast. I am joined here with my friend, Zii Watto, who is located in New Zealand, and he has a lot of interesting things to say about spirituality and culture. So, Zii, uh, would you like to introduce yourself and tell what it is that has brought you into my realm to talk about these
Yeah,
topics?
yeah, no, thank you for that introduction. Well, I'm originally from Zimbabwe, and I always try and reference myself in the context of my ancestral lineage. So I come from a long line of people that operated within the space of business, entrepreneurship, and strategy. I believe I had some shamans within my family line as well, as close as my great grandfather. So there's a lot of varying types of knowledge that exist within my ancestral lineage and that have informed who I am today. And for anybody that's really curious about finding out more about that stuff, you can Google the word Vashambadzi, and that will kind of give you a historical account of the type of lineage that I came from. All the way, I think
What? How do you spell
Portuguese.
that?
From sorry,
Oh,
I
how
was
do you
going to
spell
say
that if I wanted to Google it?
Shambadzi. So it's Vashambzi.
And we were saying
And
something
it's
about
funny.
Portuguese.
Yeah, like you find a lot of references to this group of people in Portuguese manuscripts.
Oh,
Um, and I always say to people when you do read about the Vashambadzi, ensure that you are understanding that this is a Western concept of who they were, but it kind of gives you a
yeah.
general idea of certain systems and ways of thinking that exist outside of the Western construct. Um, and until about maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I started to explore the world in that context, in that through that lens, and it's opened up a whole world that I didn't know existed around culture, around spirituality, around the state of being, and around like interpreting the world outside of the context that we operate in at the moment, which has evolved from what I call the quote unquote colonial project.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, so it's been a very exciting journey of self discovery. And as part of that journey, I came across your articles. You write a lot about twin flames and the spiritual world. And I had a session with you. Was it last year in December?
I don't even remember. I think it was
Yeah,
December. Yeah.
last year
Yeah.
in December.
I'm so
Uh,
glad you found me.
Yeah, no, it's such it was a point in time where I had just had a very traumatic experience, and I was trying to go internal and discover stuff. And I connected with some of the stuff that you wrote, and I thought, oh, it'll be really cool to kind of see more about what you do. And um, it started off as a consultation, and now like it's evolved into participating in some of your classes and a whole bunch of stuff, and
And a
meeting a bunch of
friendship.
people. Yeah, friendship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting everything you're saying. People who are listening may not know about me that I have lived for extended periods in a few different countries, including New Zealand, where Z is right now, but also and I'm sure you're exploring Maori uh, culture and spirituality where you are. And I was very interested in that as well when I was there. But also, I lived in South Africa in Pretoria for a year when I was like 18 years old as an exchange student. Very interested in African spirituality too. I think that Southern Africa is like the seat of humanity, maybe consciousness, human consciousness. And just to throw in, I've also lived 5 years in South Korea, so I have always been interested in culture, and I didn't know when I was a teenager and I started wanting to travel and not just travel, but be immersed in a totally different way of thinking and living. I
Hmm.
didn't realize at the time my drive for that actually was a spiritual drive because I wanted to experience a totally different way of viewing the world and identity. So I am really interested in what you have to say about your people and what they think of consciousness and existence,
Mm.
or anything you want to tell about it.
Yeah, no, it's always a very interesting topic, and one that I think I'm only at the surface of unpacking. Um, I mean, I guess to start it off, I want to try and explain, I guess, the framework in which I kind of operate within. The first one is understanding what culture is, and from what I've experienced and what I'm kind of exploring at the moment, I see culture as an environment. It's an environment that kind of cultivates your way of thinking. It cultivates the ideas that come from that way of thinking, and it also kind of cultivates the knowledge systems that kind of come from that space.
Yeah.
So looking into history, what I've learned is that in the ancient times, spirituality and science were seen as one and the same thing. Um,
Yes.
and
Hmm.
uh, over time, and I think the impact of Europe trying to enter into the continent of Africa as part of the colonization process, they separated science and spirituality as a way to kind of control, I guess, for the
Hmm.
lack of a better term.
Yes.
Um,
Hmm.
and that separation created two modes of operating. So you have science now in nowadays that's more evidence based, and in a way can kind of manifest within the context of institutions
Hmm.
validating, quantifying
What
what
you can
is
observe with your
exactly,
senses.
exactly,
Hmm. Empirical. Yep.
exactly it. And then spirituality is more, I guess, it's it's been externalized, and by that I mean when
Hmm.
I've experienced Shona culture, it was very egalitarian in its point of view. So thoughts and perception was very much a communal aspect, and so consciousness was based on what where the community was at
And
and
the
where they were
group.
living and
Hmm.
how it was. So there's a lot of kind of societal structures like family was the nucleus of society, and then you had from family you had other aspects like tribe and then nation and the
Hmm.
like, and everybody kind of moved in a particular direction by way of consciousness, and that direction was not linear. It was very much like egalitarian in
Hmm.
its point of view. So perspectives were very, very important in how you accessed consciousness. So I would have an idea of certain practices or certain ways of being, and through systems or processes like there's a word that we have called matare, which when you translate it to English, it's the translation kind of loses its meaning because it's court. But in Shona practice, this is a form of adare, which is a way
Yeah.
of exchanging knowledge and expanding one's understanding of things. And so what becomes
I love
interesting
that.
is I come in with an experience with an intuitive understanding of that experience. I share that experience and somebody else interprets it based on their understanding of those experiences. And their view and my view then create another point of view, and somebody else might come in and engage with that particular experience, and it just becomes this compounded point of view. And it's because in some ways I think we've understood that uh, with of how we can be. And what's interesting is Western ideology is only starting to capture or document that from their evidence-based science. Because then, when you look at epigenetics, they talk about nature, nurture, and how um, the human form has certain the human mind has certain parameters that it operates in, and they're
Yes.
identifying the limitations of those things. things, how DNA is encoded, or epigenetics, which epi means above genetics. Um,
Hmm.
and so they look at, okay, this is how your certain thoughts are inherited from previous people that lived before you, basically your ancestors. And then we go, yeah, we've known all this stuff.
Yeah,
Like we operate from the context of the ancestors, and we know that hereditary um, influence has always existed. And what's
right.
interesting about that is the word for ancestors is wadzimu. And wadzimu has very, very strong relationships with the word mudzi, which is mudzi is seed or roots. Um,
Huh.
and when you then look at that and you try and transcribe Western ideology around that and African spirituality, you start to see that what we're actually talking about is DNA
Hmm.
and how
Yeah.
DNA operates. And I think it was only in 2017 that Western science discovered that DNA carries 14 generations of knowledge. They call it junk DNA, and it's still very much contentious. But you go, hang on,
Yeah.
spirituality across the globe has known
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Well,
So,
and Deepak Chopra, and like one of my favorite things about Deepak Chopra's writing is that he says like your cells in your body literally have memory. It's not just your mind that has memory, that the things that make you up have memory. That's karma in like ancient
yeah.
India, right? The same
Mhm,
thing. And
mhm.
what similarities you see between your people's ancestry and culture in this sense with the structure and everything you just said and Maori culture since you're in New Zealand. I feel like that's kind of similar, the idea of your ancestors being your roots and there
Mm.
being this history that you rely on in your blood, if I'm
Yeah.
making sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think in uh with Maori culture, I'm still unpacking and I'm still kind of exploring it through the relationships that I have. I have this privileged position where when I came, I was very intentional. And when I came to Aotearoa, and I made a decision that I was going to stay here for an extended period of time. And for those that don't know, Aotearoa is the Maori word for New Zealand. And I try and make an intentional effort
Land
to
of
use
the long white cloud.
long lights cloud, yeah.
Mhm.
And I try and make an intentional use of the indigenous word for the space as a way to kind of acknowledge the existence of that system and that way of knowing. Um, so when I made a decision to kind of stay here for an extended period of time, it is very common practice within the Shona culture to be welcomed to a space, so that you do get that, I guess, ancestral protection. So I've established a relationship with a Maori woman who has been slowly introducing me to their practices, their ways of being, and you
I
can see
love
so many
that.
similarities. Like I've only I'm only at the entry, like I'm only at the door where I went to the marae, and she basically explained to me what the significance of a marae is, and I could see the similarities in a marae and certain aspects of matari in Shona culture, and I'm like, wow, like that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Um, and with my relation, because I do live and stay in so-called Australia, and you can see the parallels between First Nations practice, Maori practice, and Shona practice,
Yeah.
and various other uh, indigenous communities. Because I've been able to spend some time in Indonesia as well,
Hmm.
and it's like as if we're the same people, right? But going
Yep.
back to what I was saying in terms of how Shona people and most Bantu people look at memory, it's fragments, right? So if you consider how indigenous practices are practiced here, First Nations in so-called Australia, Indonesian communities and in Zimbabwe, and you start to identify the similarities, you can almost consider that we are one form of consciousness that is
Mhm.
manifesting differently because of our geographic locations and the limitations that I mentioned of the human form. Um,
Yeah. But the
so
important thing is they identify with the collective consciousness. It's not
yeah,
the
there is
individual
that.
is different. Do
Yeah,
you think capitalism is basically the reason for our individual consciousness we're so attached to? Or what do you think about the Western modern colonial way of approaching life and why it's not like that?
it's so complex to delve into that for several reasons. Firstly, there's always conflict between politics and spirituality, because politics, in my lived experience, is a control. Um, it's a control mechanism. It's a system that is designed for particular objectives and outcomes. And I spent some time when I was unpacking my own history. I was able to go back to the 14th century by the method that I mentioned before in terms of observing the Vashambadzi and understanding them, and then realizing that within my family context, we were considered Vashambadzi. And what was interesting was I also kind of was able to unpack that timeline alongside what took place when the colonial project was initiated. Um, it's important to, in a way, acknowledge that colonization existed in various forms across history. But given the impact of Western colonization or European colonization on my lived experience, I've kind of observed it with a particular point of view. Um, and when I look at it, I can almost narrow it down to two objectives that Western colonization had. There's many others, but I've kind of just focused on two, which is the control of culture and uh, using the definition of a culture as an environment that cultivates knowledge, ideas, and creativity, and then economics. So it's control of culture and economics not in the sense of financial exchange, but more understanding that every form of economic transaction can trace back to our interaction with nature. Because like there's no thing that has been created on this earth without some form of extraction from nature. Um, and so, looking at the problems that Europe was facing, it was around resources. And so, they needed to go out and kind of try and control resources around the world. So, what then happens is, in order for you to do that, you need to be able to have people that contribute to whatever financial gain you're looking to get. And there is a process of suppressing people's ability to freely explore consciousness. So the system that we have, which is capitalism, is founded on many different mechanisms of suppressing people's freedom. There is an
Yep.
education system which in 1968, J.D. Rockefeller issued out a paper saying, hey, we want to create an education system. We're entering the Industrial Revolution. We want to create an education system that does not allow people to critically think. We need to be able to control them. And that's just an over summarized version. You can read the articles; they're there on the internet.
I think
And
I'm
as a
familiar.
result of
Yeah.
that, as a result of that, now what you do is you have a mainstream where, in order to operate in the world, you have to follow a prescribed pathway. You're born, you go to school, and you working towards a particular set of jobs that work within what we call an industry that contribute to a marketplace that result in an output that benefits a small number of people. So
Yep.
now more expression or exploration of consciousness has now been suppressed into a finite uh, space. And as a result,
Yeah.
I guess in spirituality, people would say um, earth or people, like we operate at such a low frequency because we're condensed into one space.
Yes,
And so now we're contending, and things like ego come into place because your ego is your currency. Like your identity is your currency.
that's right. Yeah.
I am the CEO, and therefore I have power and control over XYZ. I am a spiritual healer, and therefore my currency is that. And so I need to operate from that space. Um,
Yes, they
it
encourage
becomes
the
this
attachment to the roles. That's
exactly,
for sure.
exactly.
Hmm.
So it becomes a very, very interesting space. Whereas a lot of non-Western practices then go, hang on, that's like you are not all you're not what you do. You're not your
Yeah.
emotion. You're not your skin color. You're not all these things that have been created as an illusion within the construct that
Yes.
we live
Yes.
in order to control and manipulate how you operate within this space.
It's so interesting. All of what you're saying is
Mm-hmm.
fascinating, and I agree. Also in South Korea, even in the modern times, and they're very capitalistic there nowadays. It changed a lot in the last 50, 60 years, but they still have this what they call like a homogenous society, a way of thinking. I used to teach classes like in their textbook, their English textbook was a whole chapter about individualism versus collectivism. And it was fascinating to me and to my students because they literally view the world as a group. And like I have to reprogram myself to do that, but I naturally view the world as an individual and like me against the world. Whereas someone in that mindset of being in a collective culture and consciousness, it's not you against the world. Maybe that's like more peaceful in a way. I'm sure it has its
Mm-hmm.
own problems because we are individuals. That's the paradox of existence. You have an ego,
Mm-hmm.
you are an individual, whether or not you like it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, and yet you
Yeah.
are one with everyone at the same time.
The same time, and it's interesting because I think in a way what ego has done to us as humans is it's separated us from nature, and it's made us feel like we're the superior being. Our intellect is more concentrated within the mind,
Yeah.
instead of understanding that intelligence is actually an expression of the entire body.
Yeah.
uh, and
Not just
so
it's like other things too. Your body
exactly,
doesn't just stop here. This isn't the boundary
exactly,
of me.
it's
So,
a connection with everything
yeah.
else. And so what's interesting about I mean, if we're just to contextualize Shona culture, our relationship with totems, and this is something I'm only just expanding. It's like if we consider ancestry as roots in the context of DNA, and we know that everything around us has DNA. Um, our totems are an extension of who we are, and so we have genetic relationships with those totems. We have genetic relationships with nature itself, and we're not a
Yeah.
superior being outside of nature because we cannot exist outside of nature.
Yeah,
So
but yet like
we often we often
modern, yeah.
we often speak of ourselves and like our existence as only within the human context,
Yeah.
without realizing that the human context is very small aspect of life in its totality.
Yeah.
Um,
I
I
mean, I
often.
try to think like that myself, and I try to approach like the world as I'm just a steward of this consciousness. My parents' dog, who I love very much, she's a steward of the same consciousness, but in a different expression. I'm sorry to
Mhm.
cut you off. What were you
No, no,
gonna
no.
say?
That's
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it's. I think it. I mean, if I was to offer some vulnerability to this part of the conversation, I too struggle with that in terms of being like, wait, what? I'm the same consciousness as a tree. Like
Yes.
really?
As this, my
Um,
flower
there,
here, I've named this flower Jerry.
exactly.
I'm serious. I bought this flower at
Exactly.
Trader Joe's across the street from my house, and I
Mhm.
said, "You're coming home with me." And I talked to it, and it's an expression of human life, just like me. That's why I never kill spiders. I cry if I accidentally step on an ant. And then I still get shocked when I see someone cutting down a tree for no reason because they wanted to landscape their lawn as if they own anything. You don't even
Yeah.
own your body. It's temporary. Um,
Yeah.
so
I mean,
yeah.
these are very, very unique concepts to kind of grasp because, like, understanding how the human construct works and how identity is formed and how our mental aspects actually work. I've had these types of discussions with people that are submerged or have fully subscribed to the world as it is, and you can see. I think we call it to a certain extent we call it a trigger. People get triggered by it because their identity is so intertwined with it.
It's
um,
true. It's
we're like,
very
hey,
hard.
like,
It's a paradigm shift to be able to think
yeah,
like that. Yeah.
to be able, and I mean, at some point, and in some interactions, I too get triggered by that. But it's the relationship that you have with the triggers, because then you go, okay, um, is this trigger meant to then validate my attachment to this illusion, because that's what it is, or is this an opportunity for me to address that attachment and start to, I guess, decode my existence in this current construct that we've created for ourselves? Because it's
Yeah.
really just a story at the end of the day. Um,
Yeah. It's a
all the
story. We're living.
formulas, like
Oh, what? Sorry.
I was going to say, all the formulas that we've gotten, like I always laugh. Like I was having a conversation with a friend on Monday, and we were talking about Isaac Newton and his uh, what is it? I think he's the one that discovered is not the right word, but apparently he's the one that was able to quantify gravity, right?
Yes, that's
And I'm
true. He
like,
didn't
okay,
discover it.
that's
Yeah. Just like
it
you can't
wasn't
discover
discovered.
electricity either, right? Yeah. No,
Yeah,
that's true.
it's like, but gravity has existed in many other cultures, ways of being prior
Yeah.
to Isaac Newton documenting it as it is,
Oh,
and
I see.
even
Just because
things
an
like
apple
velocity.
fell on his head doesn't mean an apple didn't fall on someone else's head. But yeah,
Exactly.
it smacked him in the face, but because of where he was located, what he was, his ideas are important in our current manifestation. Who knows in 1,000
Yeah,
years if anyone will care about Isaac Newton, but
I
yeah,
mean,
it's interesting.
it speaks back to that idea of culture as an environment that informs how you think, the knowledge you create, and your creativity. So, if in my logical brain, right, and I'm not saying that this is where the intentions lay, but in my logical brain, if I wanted to have control over a group of people, I would manipulate certain parts of history to make them
Oh,
believe
definitely. Yeah.
certain things. So it's very, like, depending on what texts you read, it's very, very well known that um, Europe, the Greeks, the Romans used to go and study in Egypt, in what
Yeah.
we now know as Egypt. And in Egypt, if we're going to use gravity as a form of context, it was being used in, like, how do you think the pyramids were built? Agricultural systems used gravity. They had
Yeah.
calculated so many different things and kind of defined it uh, in their context. And so Europe used to go and study those things and then go back home and implement it in their systems. But
Yeah.
once they discovered that, oh man, our resources are kind of dying down, we need to do all these things, they rewrote history. They literally erased parts of it, uh, redefined what civilization is, and started, defining other parts of the world as uncivilized, and that they
Right.
went and they brought civilization. And it's like, wait, civilization in its basic form is just living together, and people were
Yeah.
living together prior to European settlement.
Well, and it's
Um,
like the ideas in behind quantum physics and the discovery of the atom and all the things about quantum physics. Uh, and the reason I know about this is because of Deepak Chopra, but that it actually is nothing new. Even the ancient Egyptians
Mhm.
basically had quantum physics, and I'm being very broad here, and I'm not going to go into it.
Yeah.
We're about out of time here anyway, but that like
Mhm.
they just had a different way of saying it because they studied it from a spiritual perspective in ancient India as well. And I also teach Ayurveda, which is the ancient Indian holistic health system, and the whole idea behind that is like that we're primarily consciousness, we're spiritual beings in
Mm.
human form, and that there is a lot going on here that you can't see and that you might not perceive, but it's how energy works, and we are made of energy. And
Mhm.
the idea that we are made of energy is nothing new, but whoever's in charge of the narrative gets to say, oh, someone 100 years ago decided that everything's made of energy. That was the first time we ever knew about it. My dad is a astrophysicist, and I like it gets a reaction out of him. So I like to say to him,
Mhm.
why do we assume? And he really likes talking about ancient Egypt. So I'll say, why do you assume that people thousands of years ago were dumber than us? That always bothers me when people are like, I went to Machu Picchu on vacation and it's just amazing. How'd they get all that stuff up there? Why do you think people thousands of years ago were dumber than us? Maybe we're in the dark ages right now. Probably are. I'm pretty sure we are.
Yeah, that,
Because of colonialism and all the
yeah.
things. But
I
anyway,
think
so
I mean, look, colonialism is an aspect of it, but there's also a multitude of events that took place that have resulted in
yeah.
our conscious
And our
state.
technology
Yeah,
has made us so disconnected. Is that actually an advantage?
who
I
knows?
don't know.
My, my
They're
my friend
knowing,
my friend
yeah,
my friend calls technology technology, in the sense of technology
technology.
takes your
Yes.
knowledge. It takes your
Oh,
knowledge.
yeah. Yes,
Um,
you don't have to be smart anymore. You can just Google it or use a
yeah,
calculator or whatever. But
yeah,
also, like, yeah, I mean, it hasn't made us dumber, actually, maybe. But also, right, if the internet stopped working tomorrow, what would happen to all of us? It's wild to think about. Sometimes I dream about a world where all the cars stopped working for like a little while and we had to figure out how to live without cars, which have only existed for most people's households less than 100 years. It's wild
yeah,
to think about
yeah.
that.
I
And
mean, I
electricity,
have
and yeah,
I have enough faith at the moment and confidence in humanity that if all of what we've constructed was to just evaporate and we had to kind of start all over again, we would figure it out. We would figure it out.
it would be a huge awakening.
It would
It
be a
would be
massive.
amazing.
That's
we'd have
exactly
to
it. It would
we'd
be,
have to realize things about how the earth reciprocates with us and how we rely on our environment to exist. But we're so
mhm.
disconnected right now, and all we do is try to control and possess things in our
Yeah,
Western culture, our modern
yeah,
Western culture. But yeah, if all of those things went away and we had to walk places and we didn't have the ability to fly to another country and you had to actually like sit with yourself and maybe just sit in the darkness when the sun goes down without watching Netflix and then just like think about life, I think a lot of stuff would be pretty different. But
yeah. And
I
it's
do
interesting.
think we should go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just to close it off with two
Yeah.
points. It's interesting that that way of life will be considered primitive. And primitive
Right.
is a very
That's
interesting
interesting.
word.
Yes.
It's a very, very interesting word because when you look at the word spirit and you look at the word spirituality, right? Spirit in many different other languages means breath.
Yes.
Even in the Latin origin of the word spirit, it means
Yes.
breath. And spirituality is translated to the breath and how it's influenced by the work that you do. And work not in the sense of clocking in on a 9 to 5, but your daily activities.
Yeah.
Um, so when you then look at it, the spirituality uh, results in those those aspects being mystified, so it becomes mystic. Yet spirituality is actually very, very basic. What do you do in your life in order to maintain your breath? Because your breath
Or like,
influences your
how
body.
are you breathing in the first place? How do
Yeah.
you exist and
How
why?
do you make, and why? Yeah.
Yeah.
And your breath on a very, very biological level influences your body chemistry.
Hmm.
And your body chemistry is influenced by your perception, by
Hmm.
your attention, by the language, um,
But you
by
literally breathe, and we don't think about the fact that you need air to breathe, and you need your environment to breathe. You need the atmosphere
exactly.
and the earth to exist. But
Mm,
we just think we're just disconnected. We're individuals. We don't need to think about anything outside ourselves. But there is nothing outside ourselves. I mean,
yeah,
there's everything there's everything in us. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah.
We are one with everything, and we need every person and everything to exist the way we are. Like
Mhm,
it has to be this way. And you cannot
mhm.
close yourself off and still exist. Yeah. I don't know. I
Yeah,
feel like I'm going off topic here, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the word
It's very
spirit
important.
means breath, and the word, what was the other? Primitive.
Spirituality. Yeah, primitive, primitive. Yeah.
It's
It's all very interesting. And I mean, once you start to demystify spirituality, you realize that a lot of the human condition has been as a result of how we relate to breath. Um,
hmm,
and I mean, to when the summary of it, and this is probably where we could probably end, is when you look at the mind, which is where we've all concentrated our being. It's actually made up of five different components that are impacted by how you breathe. Your perspective, your perception, and your perception is
yeah.
based on your senses, right? So your sense ability is your perception, and that's the five. Is it five senses that we have?
Yes.
Um, and those five
Physical
senses trigger
senses. Yeah.
physical
You-
senses, yeah, and those
yeah.
five physical senses trigger an emotional reaction, and the emotional reaction is on a biological level a trigger of hormones or a chemical composition within your body. And then the other component of your mind is attention. So in our human mind, we only focus on specific things. So even in this conversation, there are many things that have been said, but because of our interaction, there's specific things that is being pointed out. So you'll always find that people will say, "Oh, I re-listened to your podcast and I didn't realize that there was this other thing that was being spoken about." And there's this, because it's all
Yeah.
dependent on who you are at, where you intersect with
That's
that
true.
thing.
If you listen
Yeah.
to it again 6 months later when you're in a different place, it means
Your
something else.
attention is on something else.
It's
And then it's,
your level of
yeah,
consciousness allows in certain messages. Yeah.
exactly, to come up.
Yeah. I'm
There's
gonna
memory, right? Memory, language, and decision making, and all those things make up the mind.
mhm.
So without really intentional approach to your breath and what it is that informs your breath, then you're not
Yeah.
really operating from a deep
At,
conscious space.
at optimum
Yeah,
capacity. Yeah.
that's exactly it.
Well,
But
thank
yeah,
you
that's
so
that,
much.
mhm.
This is fascinating. I feel like we do need a sequel to this episode, but I am going to end us here at this point. I mean, we could go on and on. So thank you all for listening. Thank you, Z, for being here. And if you want to follow Z on social media, would you like to tell everyone
Yeah,
listening if they want to get in touch?
yeah. You can get in touch with me on Instagram. That's Z Wacho, ZIIWACHO, which
Mhm.
translates to "it's Z." It's not my actual name, but
Oh, oh, well,
In
that's a
short, it's
story
like,
for
oh, this
another
is
day. Okay.
there you go.
Um,
Yeah,
Z is very interesting. I highly recommend following him on Instagram for various reasons. But maybe we'll be back with another episode sometime. Thank you so much
you
for
never
doing
know.
this.
No problem at all. And
This is
thanks for
fascinating.
inspiring or encouraging me to join.
Oh, I am honored to be the inspiration. So, okay, thanks everyone, and we'll see or hear you in the next episode of the Let Me Think podcast. Bye.